Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and The Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Clive, who is an advanced photographer from the UK. Clive shot this with a Canon 30D, an f1.850mm lens. This is a crop factor camera after the conversion 1.6x. It's an 80mm effective focal length, ISO 200 and f2.2 1/1000th of a second. It's the rest of the metadata. Backstory here is that Clive was at a motorcycle race, started raining, said most people were headed for cover and for the exit, and he saw this little boy standing there almost as if he didn't want the race to end, and he created this portrait. One of the things I love right away about this, knowing the backstory, is the story aspect of it, the storytelling aspect of it. And I think Clive has really nailed this idea of juxtaposing these two energies with each other. I think he's nailed that as a visual storyteller. I love that part of the image. Wanted to mention a technical thing here, just shooting close to wide open on this lens. Effective focal length of 80mm, f2.2 on the aperture, probably focusing to here, has left the background out of focus, and that is helping to simplify. There's a lot of information, a lot of contrast back here. The fact that it's not sharp is really helping. So very, very basic takeaway potentially if you're a beginner intermediate photographer. If you're working with the idea of a sort of portrait idea, main subject and then background, could be a flower, could be a person, could be a still life, shallow depth of field. Pushing more towards shallow depth of field can be a way to simplify what you're doing. Another thing that I wanted to mention here, basic composition thing, is that Clive has chosen to sort of center his main subject in a fairly symmetrical way. When we look at the way the human figure of the little boy has been presented, he's almost standing straight up and down, so there's quite a bit of symmetry that's happening here, and then about the same amount of negative space on either side of the portrait subject. And I think the moment here with this person walking with an umbrella and another umbrella over here is congruent with the placement and the framing of the main subject. So there's a feeling of fairly symmetrical balance from here to here, and the moment is also helping to simplify this really important area around the face and head of the main subject. So I wanted to mention those ideas. Love the conversion here to black and white for a couple of reasons. Colors come with their own emotional baggage. To me, this is a story that is about different emotions and feelings. And when we get rid of the emotional baggage of color and a black and white shot with people where we're trying to tell a story that involves potential emotion, black and white, I think, a lot of times has greater potential to have emotional impact. And the other thing that's easy to imagine here, that in color, that the background could have been very, very busy or very, very heavily visually weighted with rain slickers and the colors of umbrellas. Pretty easy to imagine there may have been one or two or three even very bold colors like a bright red or orange or yellow back here that could have really just pulled your mind right past the main subject. Another thing that I absolutely love about this portrait is all the things that I've already mentioned to me are being greatly aided, if not with this being the most important thing in the image, by the expression, gesture, and body language of the portrait subject. The looking down, the eyes being hidden. When you combine those things, it really says a lot to the viewer. The looking down, of course, is very powerful emotionally, but not seeing the eyes makes this more of a universal child here. I think it makes it easier for people to connect to the image in a universal way, and not seeing the most expressive part of the face, I think, lets the viewer make up something that could be even higher emotionally charged than what we might see if we could see the whole face. It's not just the looking down and the hidden face or part of the face, it's also the rest of the body language, and to me this is outrageously powerful. One foot is pointed in one direction and another foot is pointed in another. And we know from studying body language that people say a lot with where their feet point. If you're talking to somebody and their feet are pointed at you, that's great. If you're talking to somebody and their feet are pointed down the street or the other way, not good at all. Your feet point where you want to go next. And a lot of people may never see this consciously, but I guarantee you, if they don't see it consciously, subconsciously, they pick up on this energy. And it's very, very powerful. It goes along with the story. Most people are heading for the exits. Part of the little boy wants to head for the exit, but part of him would like for the race to still be going. So there's this enormous conflict here of energy, and it goes along with the rest of the image. These are the kinds of things that we really encourage people that are taking workshops where we're helping them to photograph strangers, approach strangers, build rapport with strangers. These are the kinds of things that we encourage people to look at. It's part of the reason why we encourage people in their interactions with strangers to slow down so you have more time to see these kinds of things. Body language is making up somewhere around 80% of how we communicate with each other as human beings. When I think about a perfect world variation for this image, I want to simplify it even more. And I want to say something right here. One of the things that happens with the digital is that our raw capture, let's just assume that Clive shot raw here, or maybe we could say also unprocessed JPEG. Those files are very flat coming out of the camera compared to the film standard of 10 years ago. And what can happen to us is, we can do some things to the raw file because it's flat, then we convert to black and white, and we can start to feel like as an editor of our own picture that we've already really gone a very long way. One of the things that Clive told me that he did here was that he vignetted, and I think it's working really well. And you can see that a little bit once you know it. But to me, this could have been taken so much further, and I would to simplify the main idea even more. If this is a color file, how could we bring the main subject forward and make the background recede? We could desaturate the background. We could make colors in the background darker, colors in the foreground lighter. We could push the difference between warm and cool, or vice versa. This being a black and white shot, one of the universal things that I think of in terms of separation would be even more of a feeling of shallow depth of field. One thing that's neat about shooting a shallow depth of field is once it's there in the original capture, makes it easier to push it even further in the digital darkroom. And I would here, after copying the background, I softened the background and made it lower contrast by lowering the edge detail back there, by blurring it even more. There's before and there is after. I wanted to show you something here too. Hopefully you can see as I option click on the mask to show it to you how I feathered this. How did I do it? Huge brush, applied the change, building it up around the portrait subject, and so I have the super feathered edge leading into the area that I want to stay sharp. That means I'm still going to get some blurring on the main subject. Then I switch from painting with white on a black mask back to black, slightly smaller brush now, feathering in the other direction. So I end up with a really nice transition. And big brushes, and then painting in a change, and then coming back in with a slightly smaller brush and painting the other way is a really nice way to create a beautiful gradient where you're wanting to do a transition like this, let's say when you're playing around with something like shallow depth of field. What else could we do to bring the main subject forward and lessen the background? Lower the contrast on the background. And what do we do when we want to lower contrast? From a luminosity standpoint, we flatten out the curve in that part of the image, and this is really, representing almost all the values in the image in the background. So I've flattened almost the whole curve, and then I only applied that to the background. There's before, and there is after. So far, here's what we've done. And then I just started to come in and darken. Dark recedes, bright comes forward. So there's really sort of taking the vignetting mask to another level. I duplicated that layer and turned the opacity down to take it even further. I came in with a levels adjustment, and I felt like I went a little too far with that, so I turned the opacity down. I think we would probably turn the opacity down even a little bit more. And then I overall darkened. And so here is where I started with Clive's image, and here is where I ended up. Some people might think this is too heavy-handed, but one of the things I really want to come back to in this idea of retouching is the viewer has no reference point for this. They don't know. They do not have a reference point for it. It's already black and white. It's already abstract. And I personally think, I'm biased because I did the work, but I personally think if I saw this as an image, that I would not be distracted by the feeling of the heavy hand of retouching. And one of the things that I do in my editing work is I tend to go a little bit overboard, and then a lot of times at the end of a whole series of moves like this, I could either group these layers and turn the opacity down, or add a mask and turn the changes down in some area. Here's just a real fast way to show you what I'm talking about. If I just do Command-Shift-E now on a Mac and combine all those layers, then we could say, well, maybe I overall went a little too far, and I could back off of that. And a lot of the times I will let the image sit and come back and do that, but I'm trying to make a point that goes beyond sort of personal taste or preference in today's video. So one of the takeaways, I really want to encourage you to keep asking yourself, what is the main subject of your image? And then to look at your vision at the level of capture and the level of the darkroom relative to that. Really fantastic storytelling image from Clive. I want to say a big thank you to him for sharing the image with us. I want to say a big thank you to you for being here on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.